Well, hello, friends. I hope the world is treating you kindly and you've got good reasons to be excited and enthusiastic about living and creating. I know it's not easy, is it? But we have each other and we have the ability to create and speak and persuade if we are so inclined. And that gives me strength. Welcome to the Curiosity Plus Courage podcast. One of the stories I like to tell about advertising agencies, about creative teams, is it's a metaphor. And this came to me in the form of advice apparently given to a marketing client. And this feels apocryphal, possibly a myth, but it feels right. So let's just assume enough of it is real. And the story goes that a creative leader was coaching a friend who was about to hire a new creative agency. And you'd assume there might be some advice around, I don't know, hourly billing rates or FTPs or more of that nonsense. But instead, our protagonist says this: when you're hiring an agency, remember that you are hiring a circus of artists. And don't forget that once the usual madness sets in, you've hired a circus of artists. And they are the only kinds of people who could save the day. Yeah, a circus of artists. That's a real thing, a representation of value and necessity and rare utility. That's what the best creative teams resemble, a circus of artists. And I'm thinking about this, recalling this metaphor for culture because of today's guest. Now, when I first met him, I was convinced he was much more senior, much more experienced than it turns out he actually was. When we first collaborated, Dave was in his very first copywriter role, but his vibe and his work ethic made him appear much older and wiser. Dave stood out, and this was among a team of very high-functioning, highly regarded creatives routinely churning out best of show work. You've seen Dave's writing and creative direction on brands including Volkswagen, Cadillac, KFC, JetBlue, Burger King, E-Trade, and many more. And as his career advanced, Dave started leading larger and larger teams, including, hundreds of creatives across the Boston and New York offices for Mullen Lowe. And today, he's a chief creative officer of Holliday Group in Boston. Well, we cover a lot of ground in this conversation. And maybe the most important piece is this idea of culture. The circus of artists would call a creative team. How do agencies and clients get memorable, effective work from creative teams? I think Dave has some great answers. So here's my conversation with Dave Weist.
Well, this is where I love to start, but what song is stuck in your head today? And it can't be a Wilco song. Unless, of course,
God.
it is.
That's impossible. Lately I jump all over the place when I listen to music. I'm all over. So it's been like this time of year, I'll listen to jazz with my brother, and we've been kind of getting turned on to Stanley Turrentine. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that the right way.
You are,
So
yeah.
I've been listening to a lot of that kind of stuff. And I do listen to a lot of Wilco too. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of all over the place. My morning jacket, I'm kind of in that vein, but I'll mix it around a lot.
So you and I met, I'm trying to think, it would have been 101 Arch Street,
Mm-hmm.
right? Back when Arnold as an agency was kind of the misfit grab bag of Ed Eskandarian's acquisition strategy. So there were like 9 agencies that had been like merged into this snowball of Arnold.
Yeah.
And so I want to say like 96, 97, I had met Lance at a, it might have been the Middle East. It might have been TT the Bears, but he was sort of he was in some sort of band thing.
Yeah.
I was in a band, the whole like, oh, hey, you work in advertising. I work in advertising, and, mutual friend. And then like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, well, why don't you come in and do you do brochures? I'm like, sure, man. And I didn't know who Lance was. and I kind of come in with my portfolio, meet people. It's like, oh, it's the VW business, which at the time in Boston had only been an account for maybe a year. Like Drivers
Yeah.
Wanted was only a year
We
in,
were
and
in
there
a
were
similar time. Yeah.
yeah, and there was a, well, it was Lance and Alan running it, but also who was the other Alan that wore the Boy Scout outfits?
Alan Marcus,
Alan Marcus was there.
fantastic human being.
Yeah. And so you had this like kind of crazy, like, who's in charge, what's happening? And that's where I met Cliff, and
Yeah.
and
No,
then
it was a
all
magical time.
and I
It
think
really,
about and I think about just like, and then we moved into Huntington, and but there was a crew of people there, and we were kind of trying to figure ourselves out, figuring out the account, and John Castle was running things, and then I had a conversation with
it
Liz
was all
Van
up. Yeah, it was great.
I was talking to Liz Van Zura about, her side of the equation,
Yeah,
and
I heard
she
that interview. It was great, by the way.
thank you. But her point that kind of stuck with me was she came in the door at a time when that brand, she goes, maybe we're selling 40,000 units.
Yeah.
And it was basically like, hey, if you guys don't turn this around, we're going to shut everything down, and Volkswagen will leave North America. So no pressure, right? No pressure. And then I kind of think about like their culture and our culture. So maybe this is kind of related
I
to
mean,
it, but like,
how courageous for those guys to set it up where they were preaching to the choir. Like they literally just stayed. They were that whole thing about not trying to be all things to all people. So imagine you're selling 40,000 cars in the U.S. and you're like, you know what, how we're gonna like fix this? We're not gonna try to be somebody else that's selling a lot of cars. We're gonna be ourselves, but in a really great way. And it was just that was the greatest thing about that is you could just pour yourself into the work. We were
yeah,
that audience too. We really were that
right.
audience. You know.
Yeah. I mean, everybody there was kind of like, if they very likely would have purchased a Volkswagen if it had been more
Yeah.
broadly
We made
available.
more
And
than $15,000 a year.
oh
I
man,
used
but we'll get back to this because I'm very curious about culture and the way that groups of people kind of form cultures. But how did you wind up at Arnold in
Yeah.
the late '90s as a writer? Like what? Man, maybe just like,
Yeah.
where'd you grow up, and what did your parents do, and like how did you
Yeah.
end up realizing that, like, oh, I'm a copywriter and I can make money being a copywriter?
Well, my dad was a high school principal. My mom is an English teacher, and my dad was a physics teacher before that. So, like educators, I have three other brothers. Everybody is a creative person in a way,
Mm.
and I was like, I get out of school and I'm like, I'm going to be the serious Weist brother, and so I became a bond trader. I worked at Alex Brown and Sons, America's oldest investment bank. As just kind of a scrub on the floor, running trades around and stuff. And I started to realize how horrible that was for me. I saw everybody else really like completely understanding that language and everything, but I kind of remember there was a moment where I was coming up on the elevator to go to work after a great weekend with friends and everything, and I was like, I have to become a totally different person. And it was that abrupt shift every Monday was really hard. I was like, that's the problem is like, I can't really be who I am in at work. And
Yeah.
then, so I went to art school. I went to Portfolio Center. I got hired
Mm.
back by Alex Brown to work on the junk bond sales desk when I was there. So I would go to class in my wingtips and tie and the whole thing. I was always last picked for softball. Who's that guy? And, so, but, no, and I started to realize, I'm like, these are my people. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about we go water and sewer bonds anymore. I'm like, actually, the things that I'm hearing in the world become my work, and the stuff that I'm learning at work becomes my life. And there was this continuity to things that I was like, that's how
Yeah.
I live my life. So it just reaffirmed what I knew I was looking for. And then
Yeah.
when
And
I got,
you're in Atlanta at this point.
yeah, I was at, yep, PCs, yep.
Yeah. And
And,
and So you graduate, you have a portfolio, like,
To graduate, I'm with my gigantic, plastic portfolio, and I would hit different cities. I would go to Chicago and get kicked out of buildings in San Francisco, and the same thing. And I dropped something off at Arnold, a little like leave behind, and it took a few months for it to finally find its way to somebody's desk, and they were looking for somebody, and they're like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And I got called in. So it was one of those random things. It was actually Cliff Wong saw the book and needed a writer, and
oh,
and
the
in
wonderful
front of Lance,
Cliff.
you say, "Yeah, bring this guy in," and then you have the interview with Lance, and he's reading a magazine upside down. I'm like, I don't think that went too well, and then they call me back, and you start your career. But it was great. I was how lucky to be with that group of amazing people and learn from each other, and you
So
know.
that was your first gig.
That was my first gig, yeah. I
I
didn't
mean,
start in advertising till I was 30.
you and Howard Gossage.
I started late. Yeah, I had a whole other
Yeah.
life before I got into this, and
Howard Gossage didn't start working in advertising, I think, until he was 40. And as I recall, yeah, he started working for someone else, but very quickly realized, oh, I understand this world. I understand the lingo, and I understand I need to run my own place. And very quickly, led to, Gossage and Gossage or whatever it was. But that's interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the idea of culture. And like, as you say, you're working as a bond trader, realizing like this isn't who I am. And then you meet people and like, oh yeah, advertising people. Got it. Right. Writers and art directors. That's who I need to be.
that's who
But
I am. Yeah.
but then you kind of got really lucky in your first gig. You were amongst yet another group of people who understood you understood, and you were like minds. And you were in a place where, you know, we had a client who, unfortunately had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on
Yeah.
advertising, right?
It was
They
terrible.
well, I know, they had to make dozens of TV commercials and hundreds of print ads, etcetera.
And yeah, and give
Yeah,
us a
and
leash and, yeah, let us do all these great things.
right, and it was rooted in, an insight around, the audience and like, "Hey, let's just let this brand need be what it needs to be," which happened to align like I don't know about you, but my story was, I'm working with Cliff on it was the showroom brochure for the new Beetle,
Yeah.
and I wrote the first draft, and it gets turned over, and I'm like quite literally working at a desk that in what was a conference room, and there was like empty file cabinets and chairs, and like people would come in to like borrow a chair, and like, oh, they're having you work here. How
Yeah.
kind. And I wrote that first draft, and then it was like, oh, do you also know how to do radio? Like quick, go do this. I didn't see like weeks later, all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, here you go," and someone hands me copies of the printed showroom brochure. Like, I had never seen my words in a layout. I had never had a meeting with an account person about like, "Oh, well, we need to adjust these words and whatever." Like, the thing is printed, and I'm like, "Well, that's weird." And I pick it up and I'm like comparing what I had written with what was printed, and I realized maybe 2 or 3 words had been changed.
Yeah,
And it was
wow.
like and it's like, "Well, hold on a second. This is a weird moment." Like, how
Yeah.
did
Yeah,
n
what you do gets out into the world, I know that
but
that,
also that, like,
yeah.
my how I like to write seems to resonate with everybody else, all the other people, and that was sorta like, "D have I found my tribe?"
Yeah. No, you wanna make the team. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
always the thing, you wanted to it we wanted to impress each other, we wanted to, like, show somebody, "Hey, we can take it this direction." That was really exciting where you would see some work come out of, like, you go to the printer and you'd pull something off and go, "Oh, I guess we can do this now. This is great."
right.
And,
Shane would Shane would write something, and you'd be
yeah,
like, "Oh, alright, yeah,
yeah.
mhm."
Yeah, it
Or
was
yeah.
good healthy competition.
Right, and then just note that, like, as you say, like, the bar was always kind of being raised, in so many different ways, never mind conceptually, but then, like, we were also working at a time when, like, oh, now there's the internet, and
I know it was special. It was like, such an amazing time. Like, kind of recreating I mean, every different, job has like had great moments like that. It might have been, a different time in history, different opportunities, different people, but like you're still trying to get it back to that thing where we're all part of this thing that we're trying to make together. And even when the agency's big, it's like those people in the room who are trying to make it. And now they're not all necessarily, they don't have, a creative person title all the time. Like people that are impacting it in all these other ways. It's really cool. I love it. It's the people in the room that are going to shape it and turn it into what it's going to be.
Well, and the smart clients are the ones who recognize, like, that's what I'm investing in. I'm investing in a particular group of people who in a particular space, um, caring absurdly deeply, about my brand and my customers, and in such a way that ideas will arrive that will transform everyone's fortunes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so you're at Arnold, and then Lance leaves and goes off and has this vision with Gary and starts up Modernista, and you jumped with him, right? Or soon
No,
after?
I stayed a couple more years, and I became like a, creative director there, and I had like, a couple more years there. And then I was about to leave and go to Goodby actually, to the point where like my wife and I were like, okay, I guess it's like time to sell the house. Kind of like went out there for like final interviews, and I get the Lance call in the airport on my way back, and he's like, hey, I think we might be able to get. My bad. It's a bad Lance impersonation, but
It's a
yeah,
whispery
we might be
whisper
getting
email.
whispery Lance, but he's like, we might be getting Cadillac, and I'd be able to like bring you on, and it could be really fun. And then I went over there and met those guys, and then I stayed in town and had like a completely different experience in Boston.
Right.
Like Modernista was a wild, fun, great place. I connected, I got to work with Vaccarino a lot, and then
Yeah.
became partners for
Right.
like years after that.
You're
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, and then you went to Mullen, right? So kind of raise up there, and I think about the journey there to a place where, if I'm correct, that's where you ultimately were like, you and Timmy were like the top. You were running the place.
We got to run it, we had Mark Winokur was the CCO, and then we worked in Boston and New York and got
Mhm.
to on those two offices. But again, like it was room by room, account by account. It wasn't really like, we never treated it like
Right.
one giant organism. It was always like, and even New York was kind of thought of more as like a global boutique. Like we tried to keep it small. And when we'd work with a lot of international clients that wanted to come to the US, that was kind of the doorway to like working in the United States. And so we would like bring those clients in through that way. And we had JetBlue there and E-Trade,
Right.
things like that.
So help me think through. There's Dave realizes, okay, bonds trading, I guess, is just not the lifestyle for me. To you develop a portfolio, you arrive at Arnold, and you have this career. I'm curious about your perception of kind of being a writer, first job, and now you have this responsibility of managing all of the creative people. What's the difference between kind of like being in the trenches and like, okay, I'm a writer working with different art directors, to now you're at this point where you're like, well, it's me and all these folks, and like, how do you handle managing
Yeah.
groups of people from the perspective of like, it's sort of like the coach who was a player or the film director who
Yeah.
was an actor, you know?
You're toggling back, and you've had these roles too. So you're toggling back and forth between the roles so fast. And then a busy day, you're shifting gears like crazy. And I had this, a friend actually pointed this out. I thought it was a really good way to think about it. But he's like, there's a point in your career where you become like an executive creative director or a chief creative officer or whatever.
Mhm.
And you just have to acknowledge, like when you go into a room or into a Zoom call, which one of those things are you? Are you the executive in that moment where you kind of have to kind of get above it, and you're looking at everything from a 30,000-foot view, and you're
Mhm.
really kind of observing it that way? Are you the creative and then you're in there digging around and you're finding solutions with the team, and I obviously love that space. So, so just you kind of have to know which one you are. And or you're the director and you're working through your creative vision with other people, and you're working through other folks to help that come to life.
Schedules and meetings and that's
Yeah,
interesting. So, creative director, executive, right? 3 different roles.
it's three different roles, and that's where it does take some practice and getting being able to do that, and it's really fun because
Yeah.
like you say no 2 days are the same. Like, I don't know, no 10 minutes are the same. It's fantastic.
So when you think about how you became a writer, but I'm actually want to start with like how you became a leader. Like, who taught you? When you look back, like what did you take away from Lance's leadership or Alan's or Ron's leadership or Ed? I'm thinking of the folks at Mullen. Like, what did they teach you about how to lead increasingly larger groups of people in a creative enterprise?
Yeah. I mean, you pick up little things from everybody. And sometimes you see the things that you're like, "Oh, okay, I don't want to do that, but let's not do that." But no, you pick up like, good habits. I think, one that I always come back to, and it's connected to the work, really connected to the work, is like in the world that we're in now, where it can be a little confusing sometimes. There's a lot of, voices, there's a lot of things coming in. I always think it's like it gets back to this moment where it's like, be yourself because everyone else is taken. I definitely always preaching that in a creative department. You kind of have to remind that of yourself sometimes too, that's ultimately what it is. And, and it's because the ultimate goal is like, I need your fingerprints on the work for it to really connect. And, I know
Yeah.
with AI, I had an opportunity to work for a tech startup company called Kubrick that makes all kinds of like screens. It's a generative AI company, makes screens for movie productions and things like that. And now they're getting into learning tools too, things like that for cognitive learning. But there were no like traditional creatives in there, but it was their whole belief, and I think it's a good way to think about it, is like it ultimately is a tool for creativity, and like don't give that power over to something else. Like that's ours to keep, because be the person that is the originator of the idea, and I want to feel you in that work. It goes, that has been a real consistent thing, even as much as things have changed now. I can really feel when somebody's voice is in the work, when I can feel their point of view is in the work, and like that's the
Right.
stuff that I think truly resonates. And now we have all these amazing ways to bring things to life. That's where it can go, but I still need it to come from that person, that group. Those 3 people would, if one of them wasn't there, that wouldn't have happened that way. I think that's really where it gets cool. And then your agency isn't creating like a house style, which, you know, I've worked at places where there is a bit of a house style and you have to kind of give yourself into the house style. And so you're working a little differently to sort of accommodate that, and it can be cool. But like, I think it's more interesting that there's all these different ways to kind of solve the problem, and I'm seeing that happen in different parts of the hallways and different, spaces. I think that's where it gets kind of fun, but it comes from the people. It really
Yeah.
does. And
How do you motivate them? Like, obviously, if someone's just showing up consistently with great stuff, you well done, bless you. But that's not always the case because humans, right? And life, and we all have challenges. Like, how do you help folks get out of a rut, or how do folks who are like, oh, I just, we psych ourselves out of our own capability. What's your methodology for kind of getting the most out of writers and art directors and designers or strategists?
yeah, I mean, they have to kind of see it happen. A lot of times somebody has a pretty good sense of that. Like, it comes through me. I'm this filter. It's my narrative that I'm bringing to things, which is great. But, there can be little moments where somebody can't break that block. And sometimes that requires that creative part of the creative director, where like I'll just jump in the room and we'll work it out together. It's like we'll stop everything and like just make sure that like let's get this thing back on track. We're feeling good about it and get it going. So it's like it's always a bit of a hands-on thing, but
I'll tell you
I
a
think
funny little
yeah.
anecdote. So I was working on a project. I think it was for EMC. Remember that was a client that we had in the team,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I was stuck on something. And I just had to remember that Ron Lawner, at the time was the chief creative, was like, the door's always open. And I thought, I'm going to take him up on that, kind of swing over there. And it's like, and he's like eating a sandwich and he's like, come on in, right? Sit down. And he's like, what's up? Feet up on the desk. And I'm like, and I lay the challenge out in front of him, like, whatever. And he's like, ooh, and sandwich goes down and all of a sudden he's in problem solving mode, creative problem solving mode. And he's, what about this, what this? And he's got some good stuff out there. And then he just kind of stops. He goes, damn, this one's really hard. I see I see why I see why you came to me. He goes, I don't have anything for you, but good luck. I know you can solve it.
And that probably helped. A little empathy kind of can do it, right?
Yeah. And I think like it was, probably the next day or something like that, like an idea showed up, but like I loved his candor in sort of recognizing that like sometimes, the ideas, the challenge is really hard.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always just arrive. But I also like the fact that it's like, I know you can
Yeah.
solve this. And
Well, that's great. No, that's what you felt from
Mhm.
Ron, and that's what you felt from yeah, I think that and kind of encouragement is great. There are days where it's just not gonna happen. I remember, I think Don Shelford used to say, like, the brain is a muscle, you can't bench press every day,
yeah,
like, sometimes you need a day off. That's okay, and then it'll be there in the morning the next day. You just have to trust that that's part of the process. There's gonna be little zips and doodles, but
yeah,
yeah, and then sometimes it's like you have to see it happen, like, so people don't know, especially if it's if you're into a territory, like, it hasn't been done, you have to kinda start to prove out that it can happen. You're all groping around a little bit, and you don't know where it's gonna go, and then it gets made, and everybody can point to it and say, "Yeah, like that," and then you have more confidence to go and try that again and again. It's like creating that, like, confidence through having done it a little bit.
related to that. So let's say you've got you got a client, you got a team, and they've got this audacious idea that again hasn't ever been done. How do you help a client or an account team? Like, people are nervous because it hasn't been done again. How do you help folks de-risk a space where they're going to say yes to something that like could be very risky?
Yeah. Well, I loved what I listened to Ashley's interview with you, and I really liked what she had to say, and I agree with that. It's like you're trying to like disarm the moment. You're really trying to have a conversation with somebody. Like they have to know, like what you just said about Ron in the room that day. He's like, you're here for a reason, and we're gonna get this, and you're gonna figure it out. You don't worry about it. There's a little bit of that with a client that's under tremendous stress. You don't want to have it always be that pressure packed room. It's a phone call. It's like, hey, I think there's something here. There's bringing in an extra idea. Sometimes where like now if you are in the big room where we've kind of had the sandwich everybody has to eat. We've had that moment. And now it's like, here's this other thing. And then the pressure's down a little bit and it's like you get to dream again. Like people want to have that, like that's why we all love this business. So it's like just kind of just keeping that little thing alive always in the relationship where it's like, we could do this, and we
Right.
can talk about it and maybe that doesn't happen, but that could mean that we do this, it's just like it's never a zero sum game. It should always
Yeah.
just be a continued thing.
And I think too that you notice this maybe more with some account people and some clients. Um, and I'll connect it to someone much smarter than me said, "Hey, look, remember when you hire an advertising agency, you are hiring a circus of artists.
Mhm.
Do not make the mistake of thinking that you haven't done that, and that you need the circus of artists to come up with solutions to your business problems because otherwise you would have done it, right? Um, and I think helping people recognize, no, 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 this discomfort or uncertainty or anxiety that we're maybe feeling here in the moment, that's the job. That's the business. Like
Yeah.
part of
Yeah,
the
that's a good
reason
point.
we're in marketing, part of the reason we're in advertising is because we're solving intractable, unknown problems. If the solutions were known, well, they would have already been done, and we wouldn't be here. You know, so how do you help? Like,
Yeah.
there's oftentimes that sort of the account team and the creative team. How do you broker a relationship at your level as the head of the creative department to help there be kind of like a desire on the behalf of the account teams for more audacious, challenging ideas and to help bring
Yeah.
those to clients?
Oh, that's a killer question. I mean, I think it's like, I remember this thing that Marty St. George was the CMO of JetBlue at the time, and he said something like, when you guys are in the room, I can't tell who's the account person, who's the creative person, who's media, who's that, because you're all just you're speaking the language of ideas, and you're all trying to like make something happen. When you get all those folks like around an idea that they really believe in, and then you actually do it, and hopefully it comes out great. Everybody has a sense of ownership in that, and then they want to do it again. You get everybody a little bit addicted to like what that feels like. So it's not just like the creative department, it's like the whole agency is trying to move this thing, and
Yeah.
you see a brand grow, and now that opens a door that you can go into another place, and it becomes really addictive and fun. And I think it's in that world. And today also it's like we have to be it's like we have to be fast when we have to be fast, and we have to be a little slow when we have to be slow, because there's benefits to both. So we have to be, you know, reactionary. We have to be like understanding culture. We have to get things out there quickly. Like Burger King Social was just like every morning there would be a brief when you'd have your cup of coffee, and we'd have a bunch of stuff out that day.
I remember seeing you present and to various, clients
They
on
a
the
lot.
no, you always had a professionalism that I admired in terms of like you could help someone wrap their heads around an absurd idea, but it was sort of clothed in your mannerisms and the way that you were in the room. I think they felt safe. Like, we're gonna say yes to this thing that's absolutely nuts, but Dave's making us feel like it's safe. And to what degree, like,
I come in
yeah,
peace.
yeah, right? Like, talk about that.
I come in peace. You're nice to say that. I mean, it's I think it's like, it goes back. I mean, here we're talking about, we've known each other a long time, but we're talking about kind of where it started. But I remember early on realizing, like you were talking about writing that copy, like you don't have to make this stuff up. You kind of see it in your head. So I'm like, in those rooms, I'm kind of like an architect that can already see what it could be. And I'm just trying to explain it to you. I'm not selling you anything. I'm not the show pony. I don't I don't look good in suits. I kind of look like a Russian tractor salesman in a suit. I really do not. It's not a complimentary look on me. It's like, I'm going to talk to you about what the idea is, and I'm going to help you kind of see what I see right now. And and like, if you have an idea, I'm like, oh, well, that might be a great thing. Maybe we could put a little patio out there. I could actually, I think you just made it better. Yeah, it's like I'm just trying to share what's in the head. So I like, and then in a group setting, like when you're building like out a bigger brand thing or whatever, there's a lot more pieces, but it still kind of works the same way. It's just like,
Right. It's, late 2024. The world has gone through radical transformative change. And I mean, I think about like, you and I started our careers like right before the internet arrived. So there was this brief period of, print ads and radio and TV. And then all of a sudden, wait, now there's banner ads and websites and whatever that is. And then, as we both have seen, social shows up and like that's a completely new way of thinking about brands and communication. And now we have this AI thing. How have you come to wrap your heads around AI and creativity? What does it mean for you today?
yeah. I mean, I go back to the fact that I really do want it to be I want the idea to come from the person who's working on it and then use it
Mhm.
as a tool. I do think it's like, it's a good source to volley early ideas.
Mhm.
Again, I think it can be really helpful, but there's still you involved in that. Don't I really do believe don't give that power over to another source. That's why you got into this business. Those are the things that are really going to connect. That human insight, nobody can really do it the way that you would be able to do it. And sometimes those things that you are like the most personal things that you're like, gosh, I feel this way. Does anybody else feel that way? And then those are the things that really everybody really connects to. So like, uh, don't 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 take that out of the equation. It's you listen to musicians talking about it, um, and you know, there's a lot of folks that are talking about a similar thing. Like you're going to let yourself do the navel gazing. Let yourself have that awkward, I don't know if I'm going to have anything moment,
Yeah.
because you might get to something that, you know, you wouldn't have gotten to otherwise.
Yeah.
Just give yourself a little bit of that room to do that. And, it pays off. It pays off. And then use the ways to amplify things now are just, crazy limitless.
Yeah.
So
Are you using like ChatGPT or Claude or Midjourney yourself personally?
all of, all of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What's
And,
what has surprised you in a positive way? Like, oh wow, that was useful.
well, we were just using Midjourney this morning, to create some art for some things that we were making, and it was amazing to kind of have all these versions of something that was like in our head to see. It's kind of like pre-visualizing an idea to
Hmm.
see if there's anything there early, so you can kind of stress test like what used to take so much time. You're just reducing the amount of time. Where, like, there'd be the germ of an idea to then now I can see it on the wall already, and then you can go, "That's terrible. Take that one, let's try it again." So you can version a lot faster, and you can,
Yeah.
uh, you can start to see it. It does help a tremendous amount that way.
For me, it's I know I have the germ of something, right? It's starting to it feels potent. And maybe I'm not 100% sure why. And like you say, you have a sparring partner who can hopefully like illuminate, oh, that's why this idea has resonance. That's why it has relevance at this point in time.
It's fun, right? Like,
Right.
you can try on a lot of suits really fast.
So at Hill Holiday, are like, is there training? Is there a mandate? Like, how is the agency kind of at large kind of looked at these tools? Are individuals coming in with their own personal accounts, or like how do you help
Yeah,
the
we have a
broader
lot
team
of
think of
shared
it?
accounts, people that, obviously are really versed in it, especially like the new talent.
Yeah.
Like, in Boston, we're hiring a lot of folks like out of BU and out of the different
Mhm.
ad schools and things like that.
Mhm.
It's great to see. And these are the folks that you're working with, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They come in really knowledgeable and ready to go. We're editing a lot of things. Those folks are actually like creating content, and we're doing a quick look at it, and that's going right out the door. So it's like, it's a chance to this whole like, the maker thing that we would talk about. It's to the next level now because everybody has the tools basically to do that. I really did appreciate it. I listened to some of these other interviews that you had, and I appreciated what Ashley had to say about with young people. Maybe you don't touch that right away.
Mhm.
Like be careful with that because like give yourself that latitude of having that idea. That's that will ultimately be the magic.
It reminds me of there was a point where, and I can't remember if it was Lance or Alan or someone else suggesting that, hey, when you guys come in with your initial round of ideas, we only want to see pencil sketches. Like, do not go into, was it Quark or whatever we're using? Don't go scan things. Don't do layouts. Like, let's just look at pencil sketches because they wanted to see more and they wanted to like leave room because once you start picking swipe or you start working with an AI, you're kind of committing to things.
You're in a different part of your brain. You're in an executional part, and yeah, that takes you to you've already started to commit to that. As opposed to really kind of thinking about it a little bit and making sure that's a place to go. I completely agree. I mean, I remember we're going new school, old school, but there was like an old school. I remember there was like a great um, Touareg uh, ad that was made by, gosh, Tim Gillingham, I think, worked on it. Remember Tim?
Yeah. Maybe with Adele or something like that. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and there was just a sticky that had a picture of a Touareg trying to like tow like a big like Aerostream trailer, and it was just like, the two were like tipped like this, and it was kind of like, I was like, that's kind of fun, it's like it's and I think they basically said like it's not really for that, like, and it was just like this stupid little, and it was like that whole being completely honest, self-effacing. We're
Yeah.
we're serious about what we do, but we're not too serious about ourselves. And was like, there was an idea that was just, I think Ron saw that on the wall and he's like, there it is. you know, it's yeah, there was, you need to pepper the walls. You do. You got to write and create quickly and edit slow. You need to like get it all out, and then have the time to take things off the wall. And if you're in execution mode, you didn't give yourself that time. You've already picked a lane.
Right.
So
Well, I think about like on Fridays, I do a Zoom call with a bunch of art directors and designers and film people, and my friend Ross runs it, hosts it, and we really just, it's everybody talking about, hey, here's what I learned with Midjourney today, or here's what I'm doing with Pika, or whatever the tool is, and a lot of us are teachers, and to the point where the kids, the entry level talent coming up today, have grown up with smartphones. They've grown up with a Hollywood production studio in their pocket. They've
crazy.
grown up with the access to YouTube and all, and Reddit, etc. And
Good
so
way
they
to say
walk,
it. True.
right. So they walk
Yeah.
into the door of an agency, and they can create and ship an entire campaign, and they probably already have, right? Soup to nuts. Every single component, audio recording, storyboarding, they already know how to do all of these things. And I'm curious how do you help someone like that who knows so many technical things? How do you help them kind of understand this, like moving a little slower
Yeah.
and thinking about an idea? How do you help them understand this
Well,
other side of it?
it's a there's multiple answers for that, but
Yeah.
like one of the things is this idea that I need your brain here. Like I want you here. And
Mhm.
it's because I really do firmly believe that, like, call it like a little axiom, but like great minds don't all think alike. I need you to pressure test this with me. I need us to like disagree a little bit. I want that voice in here. So I don't need you to be um that far down the line all the time. I want you in the room kind of like at the top part of an idea. And
Yeah.
that's the creative person, that's everybody in there, where it's like, all right, well, that's better. Like, maybe we should do that. Or we're thinking we're going to make something like this, but maybe that's not where the money should be spent, or
Mhm.
all those decisions that get made. And just think out like how many of those decisions get made for something cool to happen. And I need that person there. So, um, yeah, I appreciate the natural ability that they have, but like there's this other thing where you're part of something that's, I hate to say bigger than yourself, but you're part of something where I need you. And like it's like just reminding folks of that oftentimes, and having them feel like that's genuine, and I'm 100% there for that all the time, available for that all the time for folks. And I need it. I need it. I need it.
Yeah.
Like it would be horrible to have to make those decisions alone. And I don't
Yeah.
I don't think they would be great if I didn't have, all those points of view.
As you evolve your career, like what's the piece of advice that you keep going back to that just kind of like grounds you and kind of keeps you on your path?
Be yourself because everyone else is taken. I think always remember that. I don't think that's gonna change. Um, there's several of those. I mean, I think be that person. Don't look at the constraints as a bad thing.
Mhm.
They can be incredibly great. Like think of it as like just, everybody always wants a really tight brief. Sometimes constraints that we have, whether it's time or whether it's cost or whatever it might be, those are constraints too, and they can be just as good because they force that group to have to shift a little bit and lean into something that they have. And I look back at so many projects where I'm like, I love that, how that came out. And it was usually a hand was tied behind the back, maybe two. Yeah, you were off. And you were like, well, let's lean into design on this, or like, let's make it all about how simple the idea is, or like, or let's do this differently, or whatever it is. And it makes the output different. So don't look at those as a bad thing, because they're not. That's what creative people do. We find a way around things, through things. You're going to always find that. And I think that's a huge thing for right now for people.
Yeah.
It feels like some doors are shut, but they're not. You just have a tighter brief.
What are you excited about in 2025? What's gonna happen that you're looking forward to?
I'm personally right now. So I've been at Hill for a year. I'm really looking forward to, that sort of like be fast and responsive, but slow it down. I really want to get with the clients we have, looking at like great moments on the calendar that we can plan ahead and do some great work. So I've been using this analogy, and I'm wondering if maybe I should do a little trial balloon on you to see if this is working. But like, as opposed to just like one big plane that goes back and forth from New York to LA, think of an account that does all the things that it has to do. Like, let's think of it as like, 5 planes, 6 planes, where we have all these interesting moments that are happening. All of them are building the brand, and, start to change that a little bit. And then tons of project work coming in that is really fun. There's definitely a new world in that, where it's like, and that can be great. And just keeping it so that every creative person, myself included, has multiple things on the plate all the time. So it's like, you can learn a little bit from this thing. You might apply that to this other project, or you've been hitting the mark and I can't get anything to happen there. With different like time lengths. There's a quick one. Here's like one that might take a month or two to really see it happen. So it's just keeping it fresh and keeping things moving. And from the brand point of view and from the person point of view, I think I'm fired up for that.
Oh, Dave, it's been such a pleasure, dude. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Tim, thanks, man. Good to see you.
And we didn't even get into the shenanigans, or sunny corn chips, or a handful of nuts. Dave, thank you so much for your candor and enthusiasm. Folks, if you've worked with Dave, you know what a privilege to converse with him. I've got links to Dave's work as well as his agency, Holliday, in the episode show notes. And there are more episodes of the Curiosity Plus Courage podcast in the works. I'm aiming for the next episode to arrive the week of February 10th. In the meantime, I hope you're enjoying the Curiosity Plus Courage newsletter. I've got plenty of fodder there focused on AI and creativity. And last but not least, if you are so willing, please tell one person about this podcast. Share a link. Suggest a listen. That's how these things grow, one recommendation at a time. Lord knows I am not buying ads to promote a show that talks mostly about advertising. No, I'm depending on your wisdom and kindness to expand the listenership. Be kind to yourself and hug the people around you. Until next time.